I'm Celeste Riley, and at 36, I never imagined a family yacht trip would become the place I reclaimed myself. Standing beside my husband Nathan on a vessel named for legacy, it should have been a joyful escape. But years of being sidelined built to this moment. I still hear Sloane's mocking laugh. The boat's better without her. The sting of being replaced by a stranger still lingers. Before I show you the moment that silenced the Prestons, tell me, have you ever been erased by the people who should have seen you? I always start my morning slow. A cup of coffee, the same ceramic mug with the barely there crack near the handle, one I've told myself I'd replace, but never do. There's something about the imperfection that feels honest. The kitchen light filters through half-open blinds, casting stripes across the granite countertop. On any other morning, it's peaceful, predictable. But not today. Nathan had already left for work. He always does before 7, leaving behind the scent of aftershave and a half-eaten banana like a trail of absence. I was still in my robe, hair tied up, scrolling through my phone out of habit more than intention. Email. News. Weather. Nothing worth remembering. Until I saw it. A boomerang video posted by Ava, Nathan's niece. Champagne flutes, clinking laughter, sunglasses, reflecting sunlight, and behind it all the Preston family yacht. I paused, thumb hovering above the screen. The caption read, "Legacy getaway loading. Can't wait to set sail, Legacy." That word always landed oddly in my throat, especially when used by people who never built a damn thing. I tapped the video, then the tag names. Sloane and Tom. The twins. Of course, Nathan's mom, Evelyn, holding a mimosa. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. All smiling under the same sky. All preparing to board the same yacht. Except me. I opened the Preston family group chat, the one titled Legacy Voyagers, the one Nathan had once added me to when we first got married. It was gone. I searched my inbox for updates, even spam. Nothing. No invite, no "Hey Celeste, are you joining?" Not even a logistical oversight, just silence. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. That would have been easier. Instead, I sat still. The kind of stillness that comes after confirmation, not confusion. The coffee next to me had cooled. I hadn't taken a sip. Then it came, Sloane's message. At first, I thought she was checking in. The kind of performative courtesy she specialized in. But it wasn't a text. It was a screenshot of the guest cabin assignments. There it was, my name once printed cleanly under portside suite, now struck through with a red line. Below it, handwritten in digital ink, the replacement, Belle. The yoga instructor who once mistook me for Nathan's assistant at a benefit gala. A second message followed, an audio clip. Sloane's voice mid-laugh. "Well, at least the energy on board won't be so tight this year." Tight. Like I was the discomfort. The thing to remove. I didn't respond. Not because I was shocked, but because something deeper clicked into place. The kind of clarity you don't get from confrontation, but from repetition. Pattern. The mug in my hand had gone cold. I stared at the window, still striped with morning light, thinking of all the times I'd rationalized this kind of behavior. The missed calls. The unreturned messages. The brunches I only heard about through tagged photos. It was always subtle enough to doubt, until it wasn't. They hadn't forgotten me, they'd removed me. The duffel bag I'd packed weeks ago just in case was still by the front door. I glanced at it, then away. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was something slower. Denser. Like watching yourself get erased one letter at a time. Not loud, just quiet enough to feel crazy for noticing. I stood up finally and poured the rest of the cold coffee down the sink. I didn't replace it. I sat back down the stool, colder than I remembered. Across from me, the blank countertop reflected nothing back. No plans, no welcome, just a quiet slab of truth. I opened the yacht's original purchase email, still saved in a special folder labeled Foundations. That folder held contracts, bank transfers, title forms, all signed under both my name and Nathan's. But it was my money. My idea. My dream. Years ago, I told myself co-signing was cleaner for taxes. For estate planning. For marriage. I hadn't realized what else it had made clean: the erasure. I clicked into the yacht company's website and navigated to the booking portal. I already knew what I'd find. The Owner Access tab required dual verification, one code to Nathan, one to me. He'd never asked me to use it. Never needed to. I did it all. A memory surfaced, faint and inconvenient. Sloane, champagne in hand, once said during a brunch. It's so poetic that our family yacht was a gift of love. It keeps us together, doesn't it? And I'd smiled. Said nothing. Because correcting her would have sounded petty. Now it just felt foolish. I reached for my phone again, scrolling back through texts, through years of digital noise. So many moments where I could have seen it clearer. The birthday when I was seated at the end of the table next to the kids. The photo captioned full Preston lineage that cropped me out. The Easter card where they spelled my name Celesta. Each time I told myself I was imagining things. That they were trying. That family was complicated. But maybe the truth was simpler, they just didn't see me. Not really, not as part of them, not as someone who belonged. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once. A car engine turned over, the world kept moving. But inside that kitchen I felt like I had paused, like someone hit mute on the part of me that had always tried to be palatable. Pleasant. Acceptable. I picked up my phone again, opened a note. Wrote just 5 words. This was never an accident. Then I underlined it. Twice. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was overreacting. I felt like I was finally seeing. The soft hum of the ceiling fan whispered above me, its blades circling with a kind of robotic consistency that made the silence feel deeper. I watched it sitting at the edge of our bed, the hem of my blouse still damp from where I had rinsed out a coffee stain earlier. It had been hours since the yacht revelation. Hours since Sloane's accidental message. Hours since my name had been struck out and Belle's had taken its place. Nathan came home around 6:40 p.m. I heard the garage door first, then the shuffle of his shoes in the entryway. I didn't move. I didn't greet him. I just sat calm, composed, calculating. "Hey babe," he said, walking in with a voice rehearsed for normalcy. He tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl I'd bought from a street vendor in Morocco on our honeymoon. The clatter echoed through the room, disproportionate and jarring. I looked up, but didn't smile. "How was work?" I asked. "Long. But nothing too bad." He sat on the other side of the bed and began unlacing his shoes. "You okay? You look quiet." "I saw the yacht post," I said. He paused. "What yacht post?" I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. Ava's boomerang video looping endlessly, each click of champagne glass as a jab. His brow furrowed, lips parting in something between a sigh and a lie. "Wait. Were you not added to the group?" I said nothing. The fan continued its slow rotation, pushing warm air around a room that suddenly felt airless. Nathan tapped his phone, scrolling, tapping again. Maybe they forgot, or mixed up something. "I'll ask Sloane. I'm sure it's just a mistake." I waited. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't check the guest list. Instead he stood, went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. As steam began to snake out from beneath the door, I sat back against the headboard, eyes on the ceiling. Mistake. That word again. So convenient. So void. I reached into the nightstand, pulled out the leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in weeks, and opened to a fresh page. My pen hovered for a moment before I wrote, "Observe, don't react yet." Below it in smaller print, "Silence is still a language. Sometimes the most dangerous one." I closed the journal softly and placed it back. On the nightstand the lamp flickered once. A brief dimming, then light again. Like hesitation. Like someone deciding whether or not to speak. Nathan came out moments later, towel around his waist, phone already in hand. "I'll check with them tomorrow," he said, not looking up. "Pretty sure it's just a mix-up." "Okay," I replied. Just one word. Clean. Neutral. Like a mirror. He smiled, almost relieved. As if the absence of drama was proof of peace. As if my quiet was a verdict of innocence rather than a verdict of exhaustion. He got dressed and began scrolling through emails on his laptop. I watched him from across the room. How easily he resumed life. How smoothly he existed within this polished version of partnership where omission wasn't cruelty, it was convenience. But I knew now. I knew what to look for. I watched the fan spin. And I watched Nathan too. Not to catch him, but to confirm who he had always been. I made dinner. Not because I felt like playing the role of good wife, but because normalcy buys you time camouflage for careful thinking. Roasted vegetables. Brown rice. A salmon fillet seasoned just right. Nathan joined me at the table, phone still within reach. We spoke in fragments. Weather. Work. Nothing about the yacht. Nothing about Belle. Certainly nothing about Sloane's laugh echoing in my ear. Halfway through the meal, he said, "You know, I think this whole thing's getting blown out of proportion. Sloane does stuff like this all the time. You know how she is." I set my fork down gently. "That's exactly the point," I said quietly. "She does things like this all the time, and no one ever says anything." He exhaled, exasperated. "So what do you want me to do? Start a fight over a guest list?" "I want you to see it," I said, eyes steady on his. "I want you to acknowledge that it's not just a mistake. That it's a pattern." He looked down, wiped his mouth with a napkin. "They're family, Celeste. You don't cut family off over social slights." I almost laughed. "Almost. You don't erase family from their own yacht either," I said. The room went still again. Even the fan above seemed to slow. He didn't reply. Later, after he retreated to his office to finish just one more thing, I sat alone in the living room, the hum of the ceiling fan still the only witness to my unraveling restraint. I picked up my journal again and flipped to the next page. This time I didn't just write a quote, I made a list. Things he doesn't say, I believe you. That's not okay. I'll handle it. Things he does say, it's just Sloane. Maybe it's nothing. You're being sensitive. The contrast was enough to make the ink feel heavy on the page. I closed the book again and stood in the hallway just listening. Nathan's keyboard clicked from the other room. Casual. Detached. Comfortable. Like a man who had nothing to lose in my silence. But I did. And that silence, it had begun to feel like an accomplice. I didn't bring it up again. Not that night, not the next morning. Instead, I sat at the kitchen counter in my softest sweater holding a mug of lukewarm coffee. The ceiling fan still hummed above, same rhythm, same indifferent pace. But something in me had slowed to match its steady alert. Mid-morning, I got the email. Subject line: cancellation. Confirmation. Cabin release processed. No frills, no apology. Just a sterile receipt for my own erasure. The sender, the Yacht Charter Company. The request logged 3 days ago. 3 days. I opened the attached PDF. It listed the name of the requester at the bottom in a plain professional font: Sloane Preston. I blinked. Not from shock, but from a pressure behind my eyes, a kind of swelling clarity. 3 days ago, Sloane had made it official. She didn't just hope I wouldn't come, she ensured it. I forwarded the email to myself, printed a clean copy, and walked across the kitchen. I pulled out the manila folder labeled tax and property. It lived in the bottom drawer, normally reserved for bank forms and ownership documents. I slid the email inside. It would need a new label soon, truth. That afternoon, while Nathan buried himself in a webinar about portfolio diversification, I opened a blank note on my laptop. I titled it "The Times I Was Erased Without Noticing." And I began to list. The group photo from Evelyn's birthday, where my shoulder made it into the frame, but my face didn't. The baby shower for Rachel, no invite. We assumed you were out of town, Sloane had said. I wasn't. I had RSVP'd to the calendar reminder Nathan forgot to forward. The annual Christmas card where they used a picture taken the weekend I had the flu. You were missed, Evelyn wrote in her email. But she never asked if I was okay. The charity event where the MC announced thanks to Nathan Preston and his family. I stood next to him on stage holding the giant check. No one said my name. The caption on Ava's Instagram post: my favorite couple with Nathan and Belle. Each line came out faster. As if the words had always been waiting behind my teeth. I paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. I wasn't angry, not in the way I used to be. Not in the way that made your chest tight or your voice shake. This was different. This was clarity. I closed the laptop gently and looked out the window. The sky was overcast. The trees still. Even the neighborhood dogs were silent, like the world had paused in mutual recognition. I walked back to the drawer. Pulled out the folder again. This time I added more pages. My copy of the yacht purchase agreement. A printout of the guest list from last year with my name on it. A transcript from the family Zoom call where Sloan said, "It's so nice when only the core group comes." Only the core group. I sat down and whispered aloud, like reading the final line of a riddle. It wasn't personal, it was systemic. They didn't forget me, they designed around me. Like a room built with no seat for me. No plate, no voice. I thought back to a moment, years ago, Evelyn's garden party. I'd worn a pale blue dress. Too formal, I realized too late. When I arrived, someone, maybe a cousin, whispered, "Oh, she came." Like I was a surprise guest at my own life. That had been my first clue. But back then I'd convinced myself I was imagining it, that I hadn't smiled enough. That I needed to soften my voice, or dress more like Sloan, or say thank you more even when no one said welcome. I had trained myself to earn a space that was never being offered. And for what? To be a name scratched off and replaced with Belle, the yoga instructor who once asked me at a benefit, "Are you Nathan's assistant?" I smiled at the memory now, not bitter, just baffled. Because in that moment she had said out loud what everyone else simply acted out in silence. They didn't see me, and I had worked so hard to be seen. But now I knew. You can't beg to belong in a room built to exclude you. The house was quiet when Nathan came home. Too quiet. He walked in with a half smile, setting his briefcase down like it was any other evening. But this wasn't just another evening. I waited until he opened the fridge and reached for a beer before I spoke. I got a cancellation email. He turned slowly, bottle still in hand. From who? The yacht company. It was submitted 3 days ago, I said, placing the printed email on the counter like evidence at a trial. By Sloan. He stared at the paper, then at me. His face didn't twist in shock. It settled. Like something he'd hoped wouldn't come up had just walked in through the front door. "Huh," he said, reading. "That's weird." "That's not weird, Nathan," I replied quietly. "That's deliberate." He leaned against the kitchen counter, not meeting my eyes. Maybe she thought plans had changed or that we weren't going. I paused. "We." He rubbed his jaw. "I mean, maybe there was some confusion." There wasn't. I let the silence hang, watching him twist the beer cap off, letting it clink onto the counter. "Look," he finally said, "let me talk to her." "You're not surprised," I said. "That's what gets me." He exhaled through his nose, a tired sound. "I'm just trying to keep the peace." "There is no peace," I said, my voice steady. "There's pretending, there's avoidance, there's silence." He said nothing. I picked up the paper, folded it in half, and slid it back into the folder marked truth. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen alone, washing dishes from a dinner we barely spoke through. Nathan had retreated to the den. ESPN murmured faintly in the background. The water ran warm over my hands, the sponge moving in slow circles across a wine glass. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed something repetitive, something grounding. Across the counter, my phone lit up with a new notification, an audio message forwarded from an unknown number. I tapped play. It was Sloane's voice. Loud, flippant, familiar. "Just keep her calm, I'll handle the rest." Another voice responded. Nathan's, "Yeah, I'll smooth it out." Silence followed. Not the kind that made things easier. The kind that confirmed everything. I stood still, not frozen, just empty. There wasn't pain. Not the sharp kind. Only a cold void of recognition. He knew. He always knew. And instead of standing beside me, he stood just far enough away not to be blamed. I finished washing the glass. Dried my hands. Set everything back in place. The kitchen glowed in soft lamplight. The hum of the dishwasher behind me. I leaned against the sink and stared into the dark window, my reflection barely there. I had always thought betrayal came with raised voices, broken plates, dramatic exits. But this was quieter. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't lied. He had just not spoken. Silence isn't always neutral. Sometimes it's betrayal. I left the kitchen lights on and walked upstairs. Nathan didn't follow. He stayed in the den as he often did when the temperature in the house changed not from weather, but from truth. He had an uncanny ability to pretend the air hadn't thickened, that nothing unsaid was building behind closed doors. In our bedroom, I opened the closet not to pack, not yet, but to breathe. The fabric of my jackets hung in quiet protest, untouched since spring. My gaze fell on the navy dress I wore the first time I met his mother. I remembered how Evelyn's eyes scanned me like an item on a shelf marked acceptable, not exceptional. Even then I had smiled, tried to blend. I stepped back, closing the door gently. In the hallway, I could hear Nathan on the phone. Muffled. Careful. Strategic. I didn't listen this time. I didn't need to. His silence had already said enough. Back in the kitchen, the dishwasher beeped. I opened it and began putting things away slowly, one plate at a time. I wasn't rushing toward clarity anymore. I was letting it settle in me the way you do with grief that no longer asks for explanation. I paused at the silverware drawer and whispered to myself, not in anger but in full realization. He was never going to choose me if it meant inconvenience. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always come from the enemies. Sometimes it comes from the person sitting right beside you doing nothing. I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. Not from heartbreak. From clarity. At 12:07 a.m., I opened the bottom drawer where we kept the important things: wills, contracts, tax returns no one ever wanted to read, but everyone needed when things fell apart. That's where I began. Not with rage, with records. The manila folder I had once labeled tax plus property now sat on the rug in the center of our bedroom. I removed the outdated files and began stacking new pages, each one carefully chosen not for what it said alone, but for what it proved. I printed the yacht's purchase contract. Page 1, buyer Celeste Riley. Page 3, signature notarized. Mine. The transfer wire for the down payment, $1.25 million, dated the same week. Nathan's family was on vacation, drinking rosé and posting Instagram stories about legacy and love. Then the charter confirmation email. The original booking. The confirmation number. The name on the account, Celeste Riley. Next came the cancellation email. Cold, efficient. Dated 3 days before Nathan pretended to be surprised. Cabin cancellation successfully processed. Submitted by Sloan Preston. I didn't add sticky notes. Didn't highlight in red. Truth doesn't need help to be sharp, it just needs to be shown. Then came the screenshots. One from the family chat thread. My name clearly visible, then clearly gone. Replaced by Belle, the yoga instructor, who once asked me at a charity dinner if I did Nathan's scheduling. Another from Sloan's Instagram story. Legacy weekend loading. A looped video of champagne, the yacht glinting in the background. Every smile choreographed, every tag intentional. I added the transcript from her podcast episode, The Yacht Represents Our Family Story. It's not just a vessel, it's continuity. She said that 3 months after telling me, honestly, Celeste, you're lucky to even be included. Most in-laws don't get invited to these things. At 1:18 a.m., I added one last page. The email Evelyn sent last year to the family about Thanksgiving plans will seat Celeste at the kids' table since space is tight. A joke, maybe. But no one laughed, and no one corrected her. By 1:30 the folder was thick. I pulled out a blank label from the drawer and stared at it for a long time. Reclaim, I wrote. Slowly, carefully, I peeled off the old label, tax plus property, and replaced it with the new one. It stuck perfectly. Like it belonged. Like I did. At 2:03 a.m. my phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email. From a name I didn't recognize at first, Vanessa D. Executive Assistant Preston Group. The subject, guest list coordination. I opened it expecting it to be another logistics thread or maybe a form accidentally forwarded. Instead, it contained a screenshot of a text exchange between Vanessa and someone listed only as S. But the voice was unmistakable. Sloan always left her fingerprints even when she tried to whisper. S. Don't worry. She's not coming. I handled it. V confirmed. I read it twice. 3 times. I wasn't shocked. I was vindicated. It wasn't a scheduling error, not a misunderstanding. Not even subtle exclusion. It was strategy. Surgical. And now I had the blueprint. I printed the email. 3 copies, one for me. One for backup, one for whomever needed to see the truth next. Then I slid them into the folder. Quietly. Without triumph. This wasn't about winning. It was about unerasing myself. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't storm into Nathan's office and demand confrontation. Because I understood something new now, receipts speak louder than outrage. At 3:00 a.m., I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, folder tucked under one arm, and looked at Nathan asleep in bed. Peaceful. Undisturbed. I wondered if he ever lost sleep defending me. If he even realized that staying neutral in a house built on hierarchy was just choosing a different kind of weapon. Probably not. I didn't wake him. He didn't need to be a part of this plan. Not yet. The next morning, while the coffee brewed and the sky turned from navy to soft gray, I placed the folder on the dining table, centered, intentional. I poured a cup of coffee and sat across from it. Not reading. Not editing. Just acknowledging. That's what this was. A record of the years I had shrunk myself to stay seated at a table that was never set for me. A ledger of invisibility. But not anymore. I opened my journal to a clean page. And wrote in small, steady letters. No more asking, just showing. Then I closed it. Slid the journal beside the folder, and waited. Not for permission. Not for someone to speak first. Just for the moment. Because it was coming. And this time I wouldn't walk in empty-handed. Newport that morning smelled like old money and forgiveness withheld. The air was thick with ocean salt and yet impossibly crisp, as if the town had been holding its breath all night for someone to make a decision. The sun had only just begun to pull the fog back from the water's surface. The marina sat quiet but alert, like a court waiting for its queen. I stepped out of the black car with a kind of stillness I hadn't known I was capable of. Not stiffness, not coldness, just assurance. My heels touched the wooden planks of the dock with soft precision. Click, click, click. Each step a declaration I never got to make in words. In my left hand, the navy folder. In my right, nothing. No phone to scroll, no sunglasses to hide behind. Eyes forward. Posture high. My coat was tan and structured. My dress navy. It clung to my frame not like armor but like proof I hadn't shrunk. Not anymore. I didn't come to demand a seat. I came because the seat was already mine. The yacht loomed ahead, white and gleaming like a stage someone else thought they could control. I recognized her shape immediately, the double-tiered deck, the teakwood accents, the custom rail I'd insisted on installing for safety. They had once called it excess. Now it was heritage. How poetic. I kept walking, heels tapping like metronomes. A sound too soft to be threatening, but too steady to be ignored. The group gathered near the dock didn't notice me at first. Sloane was mid-sentence, waving a flute of champagne as she gestured towards something on the yacht. Evelyn stood beside her, wearing her usual pearls and a practiced half-smile. Nathan, as always, was somewhere near, but never next to me when it counted. Then Sloane turned. And she saw me. There was no gasp. No spilled drink. Just a sudden tension in her jaw and the subtle lift of her brows, the way someone might react upon realizing the ghost they buried wasn't done haunting. Her eyes flicked to my folder, then back to my heels. She smiled. But not with her mouth. Nathan noticed the shift and followed her gaze. His face froze for a beat, like he wasn't sure whether to be ashamed or just confused. Neither of them moved, but the space around them shifted. People began to pivot just enough to create a polite barrier. Not overt, not rude. Just a careful choreography designed to say, "You weren't expected." I didn't flinch. I didn't even slow. At the foot of the boarding ramp, a crew member in a navy blazer stepped forward. She looked directly at me, her voice clear and practiced, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Welcome aboard, Miss Celeste. The owner is now aboard." That sentence didn't echo, it landed. I could feel the breath catch behind me. A ripple. A crack in the script. The play was paused and no one had the next line. I nodded once at the crew member. Not as thanks. As acknowledgement. Then I stepped onto the deck. Each heel strike on the polished wood was a gentle verdict. Click. 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 I wasn't performing. I was present. There was no music, but I didn't need it. The rhythm of my shoes against the floor was enough. The air adjusted around me as if to make room for a weight it had forgotten. Inside the main salon, everything was arranged with magazine-level precision floral centerpieces in muted tones, crystal glasses, embossed place cards tucked into gold holders. A curated version of elegance. I didn't touch anything. I walked through it like a woman who had once set the table and was now tired of asking for a chair. I moved to the back deck where the ocean stretched wide and indifferent. There I paused. Set the folder down on a small table, folded my coat neatly over the chair, and breathed. Not deeply, not dramatically. Just enough to feel what it meant to fill space. No one approached. No one dared. And yet I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Because presence isn't about attention, it's about gravity. The engines hummed to life. The dock began to slip away inch by inch like a curtain falling on the first act. I stood at the rail, fingers curled loosely around the polished wood. The wind lifted strands of my hair as the yacht turned toward open water. I didn't look back. Because this moment wasn't about what I was leaving, it was about what I was standing on. A vessel I chose. A path I paved. A silence I filled not with words but with weight. This wasn't revenge, it was presence. Inside I heard clinks of glasses. Polite murmurs. Fabric shifting as people adjusted their roles. I didn't go in. Not yet. I needed them to feel the space I took up now. Not out of spite. Out of balance. They had turned me into a ghost for years, smiling over my shoulder, calling me one of us while moving me further from the center. Now I wasn't a guest. I was the foundation. Let them stumble over new scripts. Let them wonder how to adjust. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't make a scene, but I would walk. In heels, with evidence. Antique that bore my name. And let every step remind them. The owner is now aboard. I didn't plan to watch the performance. But when you stop chasing the spotlight, it has a funny way of swinging back around. I was in the lounge sipping lemon water from a crystal glass I hadn't asked for, seated at the corner of a velvet settee that had been chosen more for aesthetic than comfort. Callista, one of the few in Nathan's extended family with a spine and a working sense of humor, sat beside me, scrolling her phone. They're setting up for the live now, she murmured, not looking up. I knew what she meant. Sloane. It was tradition by now. A short syrupy livestream during every Legacy event to show the world how warm and curated the Prestons were. The kind of digital footprint meant to dazzle, not document. Callista tilted her screen slightly toward me, just enough that I could see the glowing red live in the top corner. Sloane had angled herself perfectly, standing on the upper deck with the sea behind her and the soft lighting of golden hour kissing her cheeks. Hi everyone, she chimed, voice sweet as artificial vanilla. We're so excited to share a little slice of our family tradition today. There's truly nothing like the open water to remind you who you are and where you come from. Callista smirked. She always talks like she's running for office. I didn't answer. My fingers rested calmly on the rim of my glass. Sloane continued, her tone both lofty and soft. Family is everything. Legacy. Loyalty. Love. The people who are here today, well, they understand what it means to build something that lasts. A beat passed. And for those who couldn't be with us, she added, voice dipped in just enough pity, we carry your spirit with us always. Callista whispered, gag me. Still, I said nothing. Sloane angled the camera to show the deck, the table settings, the horizon. The feed filled with hearts and comments, some from family friends, others from followers who probably didn't know what kind of truth was about to crack through the gloss. And then it happened. Like most real things do, without fanfare. Behind her, a crew member walked by carrying a tray of glassware, unaware or unconcerned about the camera. He passed just close enough to be caught in the frame. He didn't pause. but his words did. He turned briefly to one of his colleagues and said, clear as day, into the mic of Sloane's phone, "Glad to have you aboard again, Miss Celeste, the owner." That was it. Simple. Direct. Undeniable. Sloane froze. It wasn't a dramatic fall or gasp. Just a blink. Then another. Her mouth twitched just slightly. You could see the computation happening behind her eyes, the attempt to override a system error in real time. The comments on the live chat lit up instantly. Wait, she's the owner not Nathan, who's Celeste. This is getting juicy. Tell us more, Miss Celeste, Callista snorted. Well, there it is. Sloane tried to recover. She smiled too quickly and launched into a vague monologue about shared contribution and generational partnerships. But it was too late. The damage had already landed, and this time it was public. Callista tilted her screen to show me the comment count climbing by the second. Don't worry, she said, smirking. I screen recorded it. I didn't ask her to. I didn't need to. Truth once said out loud doesn't need your permission to walk into the room. 15 minutes later, Sloane stormed off the upper deck and found me near the port hallway, standing by the floral arrangements she'd painstakingly coordinated. You planned that, she hissed, voice low but shaking. I met her gaze, unbothered. Planned what a man doing his job. Don't play dumb, Celeste. I set my glass down. I didn't tell him to say it, I just let you speak your truth, and then I let the actual truth show up. Her face flushed. Not from embarrassment, no, Sloane didn't do shame. It was the panic of losing control. Of watching a carefully written script unravel in real time under an audience she thought she controlled. You don't belong here, she spat, the mask slipping. I didn't flinch. That's the thing, Sloane, I said quietly. I don't need to belong. I built my place. She blinked like she hadn't prepared for that sentence. Then she turned and walked away. No apology, no denial, just retreat. Back in the lounge, Callista was still watching the video. They're reposting it already, she said. Clipped it with captions and everything. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She handed me her phone. At the bottom of the clip, someone had added the words, "When you try to erase someone and the microphone disagrees." I smiled. Not a smug smile. Not triumphant, just calm, because the truth had gone live. And you can't edit that in post. The dining salon was a cathedral of curated elegance. Every inch radiated effort, gold-trimmed chargers, bone china, glinting stemware polished, so precisely they reflected candlelight like starlight. There were hydrangeas dyed an impossible shade of white floating in low crystal bowls flanked by name cards so heavily embossed they looked like wedding invitations. Everything whispered, "Look how perfectly we've built this." But I knew better. I sat 3 seats from the head of the table. Not at the edge, never that blatant. Just far enough to be noticeable. The placement was intentional, of course. Every detail here was. My leather folder rested on my lap beneath the linen napkin I had no intention of unfolding. The room filled slowly. People arrived in pairs and threes, voices hushed and eyes darting. No one mentioned the livestream incident, but I saw it in their glances, like watching birds land after sensing a storm. Sloane stood at the head of the table, dressed in cream and coral colors that said effortless warmth and approachability. But her smile was too tight, her wine untouched. She clinked her glass gently for attention. "Thank you all for being here," she began. Her voice was even, but her eyes scanned the table like she was looking for mines. "As always, it's not just the yacht or the view, it's the people that make these moments sacred." Sacred. I felt Callista's eyes flick toward me from across the table. Sloane continued. "This legacy, it's not inherited blindly. It's earned. It's shaped by those who truly understand what it means to carry the Preston name." Her gaze did not meet mine. But the aim was deliberate. When the toast began, hands lifted, glasses on reflex trained by years of rituals. I didn't lift mine. I stood instead. The silence that followed wasn't surprised. It was expectant. "I'd like to contribute something to this conversation about legacy," I said. My tone was calm, measured, not meek. Nathan shifted in his chair. Sloane blinked too slowly. From beneath my napkin, I withdrew the folder. No dramatic flourish, just movement with intention. I laid the first page flat on the center of the table. It was a transcript. Official. On company letterhead. A meeting between Sloane and the Preston family's legal consultant dated 3 weeks prior. I believe this is the part where she says I looked up and read aloud. She's not blood, she shouldn't own a family asset. The words didn't crash, they settled, like fog dropping onto a road. Across the table someone set down their fork too hard. No one moved to speak. I unfolded the next page, the purchase contract. It bore my signature, bank records, proof of the initial deposit. This yacht was bought with my money. Signed under my name. Not as a guest, as a co-owner. Legally. Logically. Undeniably. Still no one spoke. I wasn't waiting for gasps, I was restoring memory. I'm not here to accuse anyone, I said. I'm here because for years I've been spoken about never to. Decisions made in rooms I wasn't allowed in. Events crafted with my silence as backdrop. I turned to Nathan, who looked like someone trying to recall a line he'd never learned. Did you know? I asked. He faltered. I didn't know she said that. Sloane opened her mouth, but I raised my hand not to silence her, but to hold space. You've said plenty, I replied. In words. In edits. In absences. I looked around the table. What I've learned is that erasure rarely shouts. It whispers, it shrugs, it forgets to tag you in the photo. It leaves your name off the itinerary. It calls you supportive instead of founder. A few guests looked down. One adjusted their napkin. Another pretended to reach for their glass. I placed one final sheet on the table, an email from the charter company confirming the cabin cancellation submitted by Sloane herself. I was erased on paper before I was erased in person. Ogilvy, the family's eldest friend, the one who'd always treated me like background, cleared his throat. I think we've been fed a very particular version of events. There it was. Not guilt, but clarity. The thing more powerful than accusation. I didn't make a toast. I didn't raise my glass. I simply sat down, leaving the documents in the center of the table like an altar. No applause, no outrage. But the hierarchy had shifted. I didn't need to yell. I had shown up with receipts. And sometimes the sharpest sound in the room is silence that refuses to shrink. The next morning the dining room was quieter. Not silent, just recalibrated. There was still the smell of brewed coffee, the soft clink of utensils against porcelain, the sound of waves brushing the hull, but something fundamental had shifted. Eyes met mine now. Not all, but enough to be undeniable. Not with pity. Not with scandal, but with recognition. Maddie was the first. Nathan's cousin. Always polite, always somewhere between silent and smiling, like she'd been taught that neutrality was the safest currency in family politics. She lingered by the fruit tray, hesitating longer than it took to choose a slice of melon. Then softly, I should have said something, a long time ago. I didn't look up, just nodded once slow. That was enough. Later, while I sipped my coffee alone near the lounge window, Ron, Tom's older brother, walked by, pausing as if pulled by something heavier than small talk. I saw it coming, he muttered, not looking at me. Didn't think it would crack like this, though. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't need one. Throughout the day they came in waves, not to apologize, not exactly, but to unburden. To transfer the weight of knowing after years of pretending not to. Sloane's stylist, who once called me the lovely assistant, found me by the staircase. For what it's worth, she said, some of us always wondered why you weren't listed as co-host on the invites. It felt odd. It had been odd. It had been intentional. But hearing someone else say it, that mattered. By mid-afternoon, Callista joined me on the upper deck. You lit something in that room, she said, phone in hand. Half the women in the comments section are writing essays. Some of them even started tagging their own sisters-in-law. I raised an eyebrow. She grinned. No, seriously. One woman said she hadn't spoken to her family in 5 years, and now she's drafting a letter. Not what I set out to do, I said. Callista shrugged. That's the thing with truth. You don't always get to decide where it travels. We sat in the sun for a while, no words needed. Just the gentle rhythm of the yacht, cutting through water. At dinner, the table had a different texture. Not smoother. but honest. People spoke in less curated tones. Some made eye contact they had long avoided. Even Evelyn, Nathan's mother, who had once commented that I had entrepreneurial energy in the same tone someone might describe an allergy, gave me a long, unreadable glance across the table. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. Sloane remained silent throughout the meal. She picked at her greens like they were sand. Her glass of wine stayed full. Her husband tried to fill the silence with harmless anecdotes about weather patterns and market trends. It didn't work. Some voids can't be patched with polite noise. After dessert, I stepped out to the stern alone. The wind had softened, the horizon was gold-tinted. I stood there barefoot, letting the teak warm beneath me. That's when I heard it. From behind. A voice I hadn't expected. Evelyn. Not loud, not theatrical, just present. She stopped beside me, not too close. Then I didn't see it before. Now I do. No apology, no justification. Just those 8 words. I said nothing in return, because that moment wasn't about her growth. It was about my visibility. Inside, Nathan sat alone at our table. When I returned, he looked up. I thought about what you said, he murmured. About silence not being neutral. I waited. He took a breath. I used to think, if I didn't choose sides, I was being fair. But I realize now refusing to choose is still a choice. And it usually benefits the loudest one in the room. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because sometimes the truth echoes best in silence. That night I wrote in my journal. Not about the betrayals, not even about the recognition. Just a single sentence. When one woman stands, others remember they have legs. It wasn't vindication I felt. It was visibility. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The cabin was quiet when I returned. The overhead light cast a soft golden hue, just enough to reflect off the glass of the framed nautical map above the bed. Everything was tidy, curated even. Like the rest of the yacht, it carried the same cold elegance, perfect angles, muted colors, not a single thing out of place. Except for me. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the hum of the distant engine, the faint murmur of laughter, still trailing from the dining room. But I didn't feel like going back. Not because I wasn't welcome this time, no one could deny my place, but because I had finally stepped out of the role I used to beg to play. I walked to the small desk in the corner where my leather folder still sat. It looked smaller now, somehow like it had already done its job and was ready to rest. I opened it one last time and pulled out a page. Not a contract, not a receipt. A list. Things I let slide. The one I had started in the kitchen weeks ago, the day I received the cancellation email. I ran my fingers over each line, reading them slowly. Being cropped out of photos. Being introduced as Nathan's wife and nothing else. The baby shower I never got invited to. Her calling me so helpful when I ran the event she took credit for. Being told I was too ambitious for a family event planner. Laughing at jokes that made me small just to keep the peace. Being seated with strangers at family gatherings. Being asked to take the photo instead of being in it. Letting someone else narrate my worth. It went on. Dozens of little cuts. Tiny concessions I made in the name of fitting in. Of smoothing things over. Of not being too much. And I realized this wasn't just a list of offenses, it was a love letter, not to them. To the version of me who had endured it all. I sank onto the edge of the bed and let the paper rest on my knees. That woman. She had tried so hard. Tried to be agreeable. Palatable. Easy to love. She dimmed her light and folded her edges and smiled through things she should have walked away from. She swallowed hurt in the name of harmony. She over-explained, over-apologized, and over-delivered just to feel like she belonged. I didn't miss her. But God, I mourned her. Like an old friend I hadn't realized was dying. She had shown up when no one else did. Bit her tongue while others spoke for her. Wore outfits she didn't like just to avoid the eye roll. Took blame for peacekeeping. Saturday at the kids' table, literally and metaphorically. Agreed to things that scraped against her values because confrontation felt heavier than compromise. She was every woman raised to believe that being too much was dangerous and being just enough was safety. She didn't make waves. She swallowed them. And in doing so, she forgot the sound of her own name. She believed that love was something to be earned, not something that should have been hers by default. And now for the first time I let myself sit with her memory, not to pull her back, but to let her rest. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. A knock of breeze rattled the deck railings above. I stood and walked to the small drawer by the bed where the matches were kept for the emergency candles. I took one, stepped outside to the narrow balcony, and lit the list on fire. The paper caught quickly, curling inward on itself like it was exhaling for the first time in years. The flame danced quietly, no drama, no flaring anger. Just release. As the last of the ash fluttered away, I whispered, not for anyone else to hear, "Thank you for getting me here, but I won't be needing you going forward." I didn't cry, I didn't clench my fists. I just stood in the breeze with one hand on the balcony rail and the other hanging loose by my side. There was no eulogy for her, just reverence. Because she survived. And surviving is not a small thing. But she wasn't meant to live forever. I closed the balcony door behind me and stood for a long while in the doorway. When I looked at my reflection in the glass, it wasn't triumphant, it was whole. Not polished, but real. That night, I didn't journal. I didn't strategize. I didn't rehearse what I would say next or worry about the next interaction. I laid down and let the silence hold me like a hand on my back, steadying but no longer guiding. Because tomorrow I would wake up no longer defending my place, just living in it. The first Sunday after the yacht trip, I hosted brunch. There was no invitation card embossed in gold. No group text filled with exclamation marks and matching emojis. Just a handful of quiet messages sent with intention. 3 to be exact. To Callista, whose silence never meant indifference but attention. To Ronald, who chose integrity over politeness when it mattered. And to Maya, the youngest of the family, who called after the storm not to fix it but to understand it. I made no speech, no announcement. I simply said eggs at 10. Come hungry. The morning of, I woke earlier than usual. Not out of nervousness but readiness. It felt like a kind of ritual. The sun came in through the east windows, casting golden bars of light across the oak floors. I brewed coffee slowly, deliberately, letting the aroma fill the house. I didn't use the dining set from Nathan's parents. I sold that weeks ago. Instead, I pulled out the old table from the garage, the one I had bought secondhand during the early startup days. I had refinished it myself in a cramped apartment balcony, sanding through splinters with bare hands, staining it between delivery runs. That table had no pedigree, but it had soul. And now, it sat proudly in my dining room, scarred and gleaming, a testament to everything I had once built without permission. I said it simply: no name cards, no crystalware, just mismatched mugs, folded linen, and a bowl of strawberries in the center. The chairs didn't match either. That was the point. 10 minutes before 10, the doorbell rang. Callista stepped in first, holding a small box of lemon bars. Homemade. Sort of, she winked. Ronald came next in a navy pullover and jeans that made him look years younger than his firm voice usually suggested. I brought jam, he said, holding up a jar. Fig and honesty. I laughed. The best flavor. Last was Maya, wide-eyed, soft-voiced, notebook in hand. I hope it's okay, I brought questions, she said, gesturing to her notes. Only if you stay for answers, I replied. We ate slowly. No one checked their phones. No one raised their voice. We passed dishes without choreography, refilled coffee without asking. There were pauses in the conversation, real ones. The kind that come not from discomfort but from thoughtfulness. Callista asked about the moment on the yacht. When he said, "The owner is now aboard," what did that feel like? I stirred my coffee before answering. Not triumph, I said, presence. Like I had finally stepped into a room without shrinking. Ronald nodded. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just not disappear. Maya looked up. How did you know who to invite today? I paused. I didn't invite blood, I said. I invited truth. The room was quiet then. But not heavy. More like full. At some point we drifted into the living room. Callista curled up on the couch, her shoes off, ankles tucked under her. Ronald wandered through the hallway, stopping to admire the framed photo of my first storefront. Maya lingered near the bookshelves, touching the spines of old journals. It didn't feel like hosting, it felt like home. When they left one by one, it wasn't with quick hugs or empty promises to do this again sometime. It was with eye contact, with real thanks, with unspoken understanding. And when I closed the door behind the last guest, I stood for a long while in the entryway, breathing, not performing, not anticipating, just being. Later that afternoon, I wiped down the old table, not to erase anything, but to honor it. My hand paused at one of the dents near the corner. I remembered how it got there years ago. I dropped a mug during a phone call with an investor who told me I sounded too soft to lead a venture. The mug had shattered. But the table stayed standing. It still did. I sat down at the head of it not because I needed authority, but because it was my table. And for the first time in a very long time, that meant something. Not a title, not a position granted through someone else's approval, but a space I had made, one no one could unmake. I didn't miss the parties I wasn't invited to. I didn't miss the way Sloan orchestrated seating charts like social chess. I didn't miss the tight smiles or the words said just out of earshot. What I had now was quieter. But it was real. I pulled out a pen and opened my notebook. On a fresh page I wrote, "Don't beg for a seat. Build the table." Underneath it I added, "Then choose carefully who gets to sit." I closed the notebook and let my fingers rest on its cover. This wasn't a victory lap, it was a foundation. The house was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that used to throb with things unsaid. This quiet felt earned, like the kind that settles after a long exhale when nothing is missing and nothing needs proving. It had rained the night before, a soft drizzle that left the windowpanes streaked and the hydrangeas heavy. By morning, the sun returned, not loud or showy, just present. Like peace. I was organizing the hallway credenza when I found it. Tucked between an old envelope and a forgotten grocery list, there it was, a folded slip of paper I hadn't seen in years. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's quote, but blocky, deliberate, written in pen that had slightly smudged along the edges. "Don't fight for a seat. Build your own table." I traced the words with my fingertip, remembering the moment he gave it to me. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. Just a moment after a family dinner years ago when I had smiled too long and spoken too little. He had pulled me aside and said, "Some rooms weren't built with you in mind, Celeste. That doesn't mean you're not meant to be heard, it means you need your own room." Back then I didn't understand the weight of it. Now I did. And I wasn't angry that it took this long. Because some lessons don't arrive on schedule. They arrive when you're finally ready to live them. That afternoon a message lit up my phone. From Maya. "Hi Celeste. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I'm applying to a business mentorship program. Would you be willing to look over my application? Maybe even offer a little advice?" I stared at her words for a moment, then smiled. This wasn't a reconciliation. This wasn't a fix for everything that had gone wrong. This was something better. A continuation. I wrote back, "Yes. I'd be honored." Then I set my phone down and walked into the dining room. The second-hand table sat in sunlight, now golden beams spilling over its surface like blessings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And across from where I stood, I imagined Maya, pen in hand, asking real questions, unlearning old patterns, rebuilding something truer. This was never about revenge. This wasn't even about legacy. It was about presence, showing up fully, finally, and staying there without apology. It was about truth, quiet, undeniable, not shouted, but placed gently like a folded napkin or a page from an old journal. It was about peace, the kind that doesn't always come from closure, but from clarity. I didn't need Sloan to apologize. I didn't need Nathan to rewrite the past. I didn't need anyone to clap or cheer or acknowledge me out loud. Because healing didn't sound like "I'm sorry." It sounded like this silence. This sunlight. This freedom from performing. Sometimes I think back to that version of me, the one who wanted so badly to belong, she bent herself into impossible shapes. I don't hate her, I just don't need her anymore. She got me here. Now I'll take it from here. There was no music playing, but the breeze coming in through the open window hummed against the curtains. And somewhere in the neighborhood, someone's wind chime offered a single clear note. A kind of punctuation mark. Soft, final, perfect. The end was never the point. The point was becoming someone who didn't need an ending to begin again. If this story reached something inside you, if you've ever felt invisible at someone else's table, if you've ever silenced yourself to be included, if you've ever lit your own way forward while others tried to dim it, then stay. Because we're just getting started.